I am Malcolm X.
I'm Amir Kapoor.
I'm Katie.
I'm Oscar Grant.
I'm Johannes Mersali.
I'm Martin Luther King Jr.
I'm June Jordan. And I, ladies and gentlemen, am the 2016 presidential candidate, Donald Trump.
The United States has an unusually high number of African American and Latino men in jail. Is this phenomenon a result of institutional racism?
Institutional racism? That's just bullshit.
I mean, if you really do look at the statistics, compared to white people that only 1 in 17 males will see prison, blacks, statistically, 1 in 3 will go to prison, and for Latinos, it's 1 in 6. So, statistically, there's definitely an issue here with race.
Well, statistically, the reason that those people are in jail is because they committed a crime. Cops don't just go around picking out 10 black men that they just want to put in jail. They committed a crime. That's why they're in jail.
They're also found guilty.
I mean, if you want to look at statistically, even in Rikers, which is in New York, 1,500 people out of the 9,000 that are there have been in jail for over a year without trial, and the majority of them are nonviolent drug offenses. So, I mean, whether or not they're just picking people up and throwing them in jail, a lot of them haven't been prosecuted yet.
The effects of institutional racism were obvious in my time growing up. It was really hard for my friends to get jobs, so a lot of us had to resort to selling drugs. You have to do something to support your family. I didn't want to do it, but I had to.
You had to sell drugs? There are jobs everywhere. We may be low on supply of jobs, but if you keep looking, there's something, anything, whether it's sweeping up garbage or maybe having to join the army or just walking dogs. There's something besides selling drugs. People went to jail for selling drugs because it's a crime. It's not racism to put people in jail for committing murder or doing drugs or selling drugs to children.
Yeah, but it is racism to only hire white people because they think that I'm not going to be trustworthy just because I'm black.
Do you remember why you got fired from your job?
Because I was late.
And why were you late? Because you were selling drugs. You had a job and you were late to it because you were selling drugs as a second job. You would have kept your first job if you weren't late.
Well, maybe if he had a better job, then he wouldn't have to worry about selling drugs to support his family. You guys just give him bottom line, and he can't work with that to support a family.
America has been against blacks from the start. This is what I was trying to say before. We had to suffer through people killing us, slavery. We had to go from picking cotton to finally having some place in the world, but we're still climbing to actually be accepted by everyone.
If it were true that racial discrimination by white police officers contributes to the high arrest rate of blacks, it would logically follow that the arrest-related decisions of black officers should differ significantly from those of their white colleagues, i.e., one would expect black officers to arrest blacks a lower rate than white officers do. There was no evidence of such a difference. However, black and white officers have very similar arrest patterns. The reality is much in regard to the issue of police brutality, which the vast majority of blacks in the U.S. consider more likely to be directed at them than at whites. This is a considerable body of empirical evidence suggesting that black suspects are treated no worse than white suspects, with their demeanors toward the police are similar and their crimes are equivalent.
Statistically, blacks and Latinos are more likely to be arrested to theft and drug possession than anything else.
If we didn't have the issue of police brutality against African Americans, then we wouldn't have movements like Black Lives Matter.
What about all lives matter? Like, what happens when a black man kills a white cop? There's not this huge riot over it. It's because the cop was protecting himself against someone. When a white cop kills a black man, it's because he was protecting himself, not because the person was black. He was just doing his job.
When Oscar was arrested, they specifically sought out the African American, even though the white person was the one who started the fight. And they shot him without giving him a second chance.
I didn't even have a gun on me.
When we were informed of the altercation, the only person we could find first happened to be Oscar and his friends.
Well, why did you stop looking whenever they were the only ones you found?
We found them at first. We had other officers on the scene looking for the rest of them.
I think you were making assumptions about us just because we were black, thinking that we're automatically going to be more aggressive.
It wasn't an assumption. We were responding to the call we received about an altercation with you and your friends with some other men.
You still didn't have to shoot me. I didn't have a gun on me. I didn't do anything. I just stood up.
More than 50 years ago, I said, I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation, but they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And black people are still getting arrested and shot just because of the color of their skin.
I mean, like, I do believe that this is true. I mean, I'm a lawyer, and I've said it before, and I'll say it again, that the firm that I want will never be mine, it'll never be ours, it's theirs, and we're always just going to remind ourselves that we're just invited to the party. We're here to look on, and we're never going to be a part of the normal.
This party's for everyone. We have a black president. In Congress, we have a mix of all races, and we have males and females.
Me.
Every time I go to the airport, I give myself up, because they look at me strangely because of the way I look. Definitely race and skin color plays into everything that we do.
Just because you think that you're not being racist doesn't mean you're not. Just for example, like he said about the airport, he's obviously going to be checked out more just because of the way he looks. And us black people are going to be looked at differently on the street because of our color of our skin.
Statistically, a black male born in 1991 has a 69% chance of spending time in prison at some point in his life. 1 of 9 African American men will be incarcerated between the age of 20 and 34. Black males ages 30 to 34 have the highest incarceration rate of any race and ethnicity.
Whose fault is that?
Right. 1 in every 3 black people will go to jail at some point in their life. I think this is for one reason, racial profiling.
They have to be charged with something. We can't just charge them because we want to.
Yes, but for example, if a cop sees a black man going a couple miles an hour over the speed limit, he's more likely to pull him over just because he looks suspicious.
Incorrect.
Also, another reason that so many more black people are arrested is because in our neighborhoods there's a lot more cops that are patrolling.
It's because we're smart. We get more calls in your area. Might as well just keep them there all the time. We're going to catch you anyways. Since the descriptions are generally what enable the police to make arrests in such cases, even the most racist officer has very little room for discretion, i.e. he cannot arbitrarily arrest a black person if a victim identifies a white offender. NCVS data shows that statistically the average black is far more likely than the average white to be identified by a victim as the perpetrator of a violent crime. This racial gap, moreover, is approximately equal to the racial gap in actual arrest rates. In other words, blacks are arrested for violent crimes at higher rates than whites, not because of police racism, but because they commit these crimes at higher rates than whites. If it's so racist that we're arresting more blacks than whites, then why haven't us police officers been charged with hate crimes? If it was so obvious that it's a hate crime, then it would be obvious to make us be guilty.
But it's not a hate crime. It's not they're not trying to show that it's a hate crime. They're trying to show that there's this underlying institutionalized racism that you can't see on the surface unless you dive into it and you really pay attention to what's happening.
Institutional racism is a subconscious action that no one really knows they're doing or saying. So really there's no way to prove it. It just kind of happens.
Well, you're protected by the privilege of the system. While we're just out here fending for ourselves, you sit from up there with all the power.
Maybe more of us would be in college if there wasn't so many getting arrested all the time. I mean, there's just as many white people selling drugs as there are black people. It's just three times more black people are getting put in jail for it.
And the whole issue is white privilege is everywhere. I have to go to 3 different stores just to find a shade of makeup that matches my skin tone.
Back to the college thing, if you add the numbers of incarcerated young black males, it's 193,000, or slightly over 10% of the population. And according to the same census data, 530,000 of those African American males, or 28%, were enrolled in college or universities.
More than 60 years ago, when I was fighting for equal rights, we faced the same problems we do today. The white people in power make it difficult for the black people in power to become more educated and get into college. They restrict them to having minimum wage jobs where they can't even afford college.
Police brutality needs to stop. I was killed, but I was not the only one affected. think of my family, think about my daughter. What's she gonna do?
While racism may not be apparent, it's still underlying. It's still institutionalized within the justice system and within society. It's affected my everyday life, and it's affected other people's everyday
People
life.
seem to think having a black president means it's the end of racism. However, our fight still remains, but just with a different name. White privilege, slavery, it's all just holding back the black man from achieving the greatness they deserve.
I'm gonna stick with what I originally said. It's messed up that the cop simply sought out Oscar without asking any questions and shot him without a second thought.
I had a dream for equal rights, and although we may technically have equal rights, we're not all treated the same.
In reality, institutional racism is a thing and probably still will always be. There's no way to stop it, but there is a way to help prevent it when it comes to situations like our justice system.
Racism against blacks exists. I know it and you know it, but it is no longer a meaningful obstacle to success. People are not angels, and some people are rotten. Humans make mistakes, and always will. But the facts do not show a racist criminal justice system.
We've discussed a lot of important things today, especially on whether or not institutional racism is real or not real. But the most important thing to remember, ladies and gentlemen, is vote for Donald Trump.